welcome to officially the Wolf of Snow Hollow panel. I see a poster here. I see a poster here. We're missing one though.
Ben rolled up.
There we go. There it is. All right.
I don't have a frame yet.
I wish I had one to hold up too, but I just, all right. All right. So you guys were all involved with Thunder Road as well. So how did you all come together?
Ben, why don't you start? You go back the furthest.
Yeah. So I went to college with Jim, who obviously directed both, and then also Danny Madden, who directed a film called Beast Beast that we had at Sundance this year, that Tara from Fangoria also produced with Matt and I. But we started working together, Jim and I, back like 2011, 2012. And he and I were producing partners before he started directing. So we've kind of been along the road together. And our first like more legitimate feature, our first thing that was like over an hour and had more than $1,000 behind it, we produced with Matt, and that was The Grief of Others.
Yeah, so that's how I met them. They had met the director at a film festival and asked how they could help his next project. And I was producing that film. Ben and Jim came on, and then we all like clearly connected on a level that like we approached movie making the same way. And shortly after that, Jim, he had been living in the Bay Area. He was working at ILM in the visual effects department, and he moved down from the Bay Area to Los Angeles to try to take more of a crack at just being a filmmaker, whether that was like producing or any other type of work. And it was in that time that he, on a weekend, made the short film Thunder Road, which was like very late in the year, submitted late to Sundance, and like got accepted and then won Sundance. And it was on the heels of winning Sundance that around the same time I had met Natalie at another film festival, at the Hollywood Film Festival. And so when Jim got asked to start making other short films, he had been asked to commission a group of 6 short films for a company called Full Screen. And so I'd been working with Natalie, and I asked her to come in and produce those for Jim. So Natalie, you want to take that?
Take it from there.
Sure. And yeah, and I mean, and Jim and I immediately clicked, and like Ben was part of like that group, and we just all like started making stuff together, and we like continued to do, we did those 6 shorts, and then we did this like kind of triptych kind of similar thing, another series for a company called Topic with Jim that he wrote and directed. And then when the feature came around, we all hopped on board and went out to Austin and made a movie. And we've been working together ever since. Then it was Wolf of Snow Hollow, and we're actually in post-production on Jim's newest film called The Beta Test.
Awesome. I love that. It's just so organic how you guys came together. Like, it's like you're like on this train, and as the train is going, you're like picking up team members because you're all just like meshing. And it's cool that you guys have just like built this momentum.
Yeah, it's really that easy. I mean, it's like we just, as we find people we like, we find ways to keep working with them. I mean, one of the benefits to how we do what we do is that we do so much. Like besides the films we're doing with Jim, we, you know, there's a plethora of other projects. Like Ben mentioned, we've got a film with Danny Madden called Beast Beast that was, you know, at a festival last year. Like even this team, the 3 of us, just produced another werewolf movie this last February, March, with a completely different team and different director. This director Josh Rubin, who did the film Scare Me, which I highly recommend. It's on Shudder if you guys haven't seen that. And so like, you know, we're just constantly working on new things, whether it's commercials or short films or features. And as we find those people that like think the same way, approach creativity the same way, support directors in the same way, we just find ways for them to never leave. We just, you know.
It extends to the crew as well. Like, you know, the production designer, Charlie Texter, has like done, I think, all 10 of Jim's shorts, as well as the Thunder Road feature, as well as Wolf of Snow Hollow, as well as the Beta Test. Like, and a lot of the actors, you know, a lot of the actors in Wolf of Snow Hollow were in the Thunder Road feature, and also we started casting from that first collection of shorts that we did for Full Screen. And so, yeah, once we find people that kind of fit the vibe. We just like never let them go.
You're one of us
entire
now.
cast, I think. I was saying this to somebody earlier because, you know, like the lead cast, like Robert Forrester, I'd worked with on a movie called Too Late that we distributed and I co-produced. Ricky Lindholm was in our first movie we ever did as a company, The Dramatics. And then like, you know, Kevin Shengaris and Skylar Bible and Hannah Elder and, you know, like even Chloe East was like, her and Jim were friends on, I think Instagram, and that's how we connected with her. And like everybody had some sort of like friendly connection before we were like, hey, do you want to go in the middle of winter to Utah? Out, you know,
When we get to 8,500 feet and freeze, yeah.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of Southerners.
Exteriors. The werewolf movie, you have to have moonshots, you have to have nighttime exteriors.
I mean, even Jimmy Tatro, Natalie had worked with him. Natalie produced several things for Tony Usenda, who did like American Vandal, and he does all of Little Dicky's music videos. And Natalie produced the music video Freaky Friday, which Jimmy's in. So like, it was literally like, it was just a family affair. Like we called it winter camp. It was like all just of our friends out in the snow making a movie that somehow the studio let us make.
I feel like that's ideally the dream, you know, it's like you like meet this group of people and you click and then you just keep adding on to that and adding on to that, but that's not always reality. But for you guys it is. So I think that's extra amazing to hear that story and the way that you guys have grown. This is really cool. And amazing stuff is coming out of it. Like you can tell that you guys are just having like a fucking blast because it's so fun to watch.
The secret is having a chef in the group.
A chef? Is that what it is?
That's Benny. Benny cooks our meals for us at night.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Every night, like even on nights that we shot overnight and like wrapped at 5 a.m., we would come back to the like big bed and breakfast that we all were staying at, and then Ben would like cook this, like spend an hour and making this amazing meal for us. We would all gather together and have like dinner together at 5 a.m.
That's morale right there. Like I need a Ben in my life.
We all do.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you guys were obviously, I'm guessing then, involved with this project very early on because you're constantly working together as a team. Was there something specific about The Wolf of Snow Hollow that like appealed to each of you?
It kind of like just came out in that same organic way where, you know, after Thunder Road, the feature, won the grand jury at South by Southwest, there were, you know, lots of people coming to our offices and screening Thunder Road and kind of asking about like what was up next. And of course, like Jim is constantly writing and constantly creating. And so he had, you know, a couple different projects and scripts that were ready to go. And it just so happened that XYZ, this really great company that we worked with on this film, they saw Thunder Road and they were like, hey, does Jim have any genre stuff? And Jim was like, yeah, I have this werewolf movie that I wrote. They read the script and then like really, really quickly, it was like, great, we think this would be a great pairing for MGM's Orion team. And we're like, great. And then we had a meeting with Orion and they're like, great, we love it, let's make it. And we were actually like making it very quickly. It was a very, very fast process from just that initial meeting at our offices where they screened Thunder Road and we're like, we like this filmmaker. What else does he have?
And that's one of the things that we had touched to about the idea and like why Jim came up with it in the first place was just this ability. It's so much more of that like Trojan horse mentality of you put it in this context of a werewolf and all of these different fun things happening that then you can kind of slide in a ton of the Thunder Road stuff that was really meaningful to us. But even going to Cannes with Thunder Road, there's only so many people who are going to see a movie about a father and a daughter in Texas versus that kind of like much broader audience that you can bring all of those things that you're thinking about and want to communicate in. And having this like werewolf, this idea of duality and all of the fun things that you get to play with additionally was just this really neat step up in broadening of his appeal.
I remember hearing Edgar Wright talk about that in an interview. He was talking about The World's End and like how that movie is basically like a metaphor for like, you know, growing up and going back to your hometown. And some interviewer or like a review, like wrote like, oh, the movie's really great, but I wish it had just been the movie about like the guys going back to their hometown, and you had like stripped away all the genre stuff. And Edgar Wright was in the interview was like, he's not wrong, but like 300,000 people would have seen that movie, and 3 million people are seeing this one. So like, he's like, you can't argue with that, you know?
Unless Zach Braff's in it.
Yeah, it really was this beautiful story kind of packaged in this werewolf package as the exterior. And then you're like, you get into it and it's a beautiful father-daughter story, but then also a beautiful father-son. And like, he's just coming into his own. It's really layered, and it's just, it discounts it to call it just a werewolf movie, but it was a very cool werewolf packaging.
Well, I think what appealed to me and was smart about the script that we talked a lot about in prep was that Jim really picked a monster that, was a metaphor for what the character's dealing with. Like, I remember him talking to us about how the idea of a werewolf is actually like something that's used in the alcoholics community to talk about somebody who's gone off the wagon and like hiding it from other people. And so like is living this duality of a life, and like you don't know when they're going to sort of be the extreme person or where they're going to be like the you know, the nice person. And so being able to sort of like, yes, go towards genre because there's a commercial appeal to it, but like specifically picking the monster that represented the things you want to talk about in terms of like, you know, masculinity and, you know, what it means to be a father and what it means to be a son and all those things, like ideas that he had explored in Thunder Road that he was expanding on here. Like, it just felt very smart to us. It didn't feel like, nothing felt tacked on. It didn't feel like there was two separate stories. There was like a monster story and then this father story. It felt like they were the same idea wrapped into one. And I think like that's something that, you know, drove all of us during the making of it was, you know, just exploring those concepts, like, and talking through them.
It was a very smooth marriage of those two ideas for sure. And then there's like intercutting where things are happening and it's like paralleling, but nothing felt forced. It just felt, again, just very organic. Like, yes, of course, this makes sense and this is how it goes and this is what we're talking about here. But just, yeah, and just, it was just really beautifully done and a lot of fun.
Thank you.
So you guys went to Utah to shoot it. How did you choose that location? Did you know that early on that that's where you were going to be going? Obviously you needed snow and a shit ton of it.
We looked at two locations. We looked at upstate New York and we looked at Utah. Really, it was sort of like it was originally written, was it written to be Vermont? Am I making that up? Or
No, Big Bear
Big Bear.
in California.
Oh, right. And we actually even talked about Big Bear for a second as well. I think because of the budget level, in order to make the financing work for what we wanted to do, we needed a tax credit. And California is very challenging that way. Like, I think if we had done this film for a smaller scale, we could have looked at Big Bear. But once we were looking at the budget that we were looking at, we needed the tax credit to factor in. So New York and Utah became like the obvious choices for us. And then we had been really close with the Utah Film Commission. Derek Milius has just been a friend to us for years. I mean, we know a lot of people from Utah that are part of the sort of Vanishing Angel team that introduced us to Derek, and then we see him every year at Sundance, and he invites us to his lounge there, and we get hot cocoa and hang out and talk. And we called him, and like, it was actually, I think the first time we called him, it wasn't going to work out. And then we were getting ready to commit to a different state. And I called him back as like one more sort of like, are you sure it's not going to work there? And he's like, we literally lost a project this morning and more money opened up, so you should come out here. And we were like ecstatic. Like, it was the number one place I think we wanted to shoot. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, because of the visuals, like the mountains obviously in Utah are like so big and like gorgeous. And so it's just like it creates that landscape of, you know, a small town in this kind of isolated mountain community that made the actual city of Snow Hollow come to life in a way that I don't think we could have done anywhere else, really.
Yeah.
It was so nice that like we had this film Greener Grass, the one that they were now the shoulder, played Sundance that year. So we literally like were prepping the movie and then like drove over to Park City for the premiere of Greener Grass and like did Sundance for a weekend and then like went right back to prepping the movie without it being like this big disruptive thing to us, as opposed to like this year. this year we had the same thing with Beast Beast, but we were prepping a movie in New York. So we all had to like fly from New York to Utah to go to the premiere of Beast Beast and then fly back to New York and shoot a week later, and we were just wrecked. So it was
Oh, God.
We just shot 20 minutes outside of Park City, so it made it really convenient. We also got to ski once while we were out there shooting.
Once, all right.
To be able to have like one day where we were, I think it wasn't even a full day, it was like a half day, but we were really excited.
But what I'll say is I'll just never allow that again in production, because I hate to sort of call him out on this, but our gaffer went that morning and he was like, hey, I'm going to get lessons in snowboarding before you guys show up, so I'll be good at snowboarding when you guys get there. And Natalie, myself, and Skylar Bible, who plays Officer Gutierrez in the script, we all drove up and we ran into Kevin. Actually, Skylar and I were already hitting the slopes, and Natalie ran into Kevin in the lobby, and he had broken his collarbone.
No way.
Yeah, and I mean, luckily it was like we were just a week out from wrapping, and so he flew back to New Orleans where he's based, had surgery, and then flew back to Utah to finish out the shoot. And so it was
In a sling, just like
I know, I'm like picturing he's like in a sling and just like trying to like set up like.
No. Thankfully, he was just talking through a radio.
Okay.
But yeah, it was. We wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
I learned my lesson about like waiting until wrap until you go skiing.
Yeah, so no more extreme sports on shoot days. Like save that for after the rest.
I look at people that like need their arms and legs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit down and do your job fine.
You're on the approved list. We don't need your limbs. You can go ahead and go have your lesson.
Maybe like the sound mixer who gets to sit at his station, as long as he can like move the dials.
Right.
Or maybe just not learn a new thing, because Kevin was a skier learning to snowboard for the first time.
Okay. I feel like he was going really hard for his first time then to like break his collarbone. Like, man, take on the bunny slope. Like, what are you
He's
doing?
6'6", so if you just fall,
Oh,
you
okay.
don't have to be going that fast. You get going fast on the way down.
All right. So how long did you guys spend actually shooting?
It was a 23-day shoot.
23-day shoot? Okay. Would you wish you would have had more time? Like ideally, would you have had more time, or is that like ample for what you guys needed?
Yeah, always. I think that's one of the crazy things about the way that the industry kind of operates, is the idea is you can make a film for less by doing it in like the shorter amount of time. But I think in some ways, like if we had had 35 people on set and 35 days, that makes it such a different experience for the actors, for art department, for the whole crew to have less that they have to accomplish on a single day, and just more time to really get that thing done. I'd love to experiment with that, but it's so tough when you're dealing with somebody else's money, and this is the way that it's always been done in film, to get to say, no, we don't need 55 people, we need days. But that was definitely something we were fighting for the entire time, was to get the day count up.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, much more than Thunder Road. Thunder Road was 18 days, is that right, Natalie? Yeah.
14 and a half.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
it was
14
14 and a half.
Oh my God.
We've done too many
Oh,
movies. I can't
geez.
remember the day counts for each of them, but 14 and a half. So yeah, so we added on 10 and a half days, and it still felt, I mean, it always feels tight.
So you guys
and
had 10 bonus days, easy.
it also in a bunch of stunts and characters and locations and
A lot of effects, yeah.
Yeah.
But you guys, you said you're working with a lot of the same crew and actors and the whole team from Thunder Road. So do you think that lends itself then to having to be like crunching into time like that, because you kind of already know each other and you kind of know how to work together?
Yeah.
We
there's
also have long.
Sorry, go ahead, Ben. You go.
We also have long pre-production periods, because it is that kind of family. So we're able to really expand that timeline and use that more creatively and really get ahead of the process together, where in some ways you might not, when you're going out to Utah, you might not have the ability to bring your production designer in a month and a half before, but because it is somebody that you've done 7 films with, they're willing to like stay in a bunk bed with you and make that work and that type of thing. So,
That's actually true.
That's actually
Production designer were in bunk beds.
maybe
Yeah,
that's the secret to it.
I was originally in the bunk bed with Charlie, and I found out he snored. I lasted like 2 days until I found out that Natalie had a walk-in closet that could fit a mattress in it. I dragged my mattress into Natalie's closet and spent the rest of the shoot sleeping on a floor, which was better than Charlie snoring.
Wow. All right.
That's how we explain it when we're like, you know, they're like, oh, great. Like, so, you know, you had a student movie and we're like, well, it was still very low budget. Like our entire team was staying at one bed and breakfast. Almost everyone was like sharing a room. Some were in bunk beds. Like one of the producers was in a bunk bed with like the production designer. One of the producers was sleeping on the floor in a closet. It was, but like, you know, it still was, you know, was fun. We even had a like nicer house for some of our cast to stay in. And what would sometimes happen is like some of the cast that, you know, were like old friends of ours, like Skylar, they would actually end up just crashing on our couch and in the bed and breakfast because they just wanted to be around the action. They just like wanted to, you know, they would have like one of the great dinners that Ben would cook and then everyone would play Uno together. And because it had that summer camp atmosphere, people just wanted to be around. So they're like, I prefer to crash on a couch and be around all the stuff happening than like be, you know, in the nice bed in the nice Airbnb.
But it
Right.
also worked production wise, like, so we had our assistant editor or assembly editor, Dustin Hahn, who's also a writer and director and actor that we work with, had come out, and we put him in the adjoining room to Jim, and we set up an editing bay there. And so Jim at the end of the day would actually go and watch cuts of the film, and on the same compound was our director of photography. So we could also invite her in and she could see how the film was cutting together. And like every once in a while, like, you know, like the production designer would get brought in. And so people could watch sequences being cut together to like, not only understand like how the tone of the film was shaping up, but also like what was working, what wasn't working. Like when like, you know, hey, like we had spent a lot of time lighting the scene for a specific look, but when we saw how it was actually being used in the film, like maybe we don't need to light it like that. Like we could just have those conversations in real time, all while having a delicious meal that Ben cooked. And like it didn't feel like work. It just felt like what you do at the end of the day on a location shoot, you know?
Yeah,
So
it buys you that time having that family atmosphere as well, where you really do have an extra hour and a half of people's brains, and you have them at a place where they're feeling really comfortable and really able to talk and collaborate instead of feeling this like bigger pressure from set or anything like that.
Yeah, it allows for like very creative problem solving.
and a
Yeah,
lot
you guys were kidding about like the summer camp kind of atmosphere, but that absolutely, I feel like lends itself to just being creative and collaborating, like ultimate collaboration, it sounds like.
yeah.
Well,
We
cool.
try to do that in LA too. I mean, it's been one of the saddest things about COVID is not having an office, but like the way we've sort of created that atmosphere, even when we're here, is like we've set up an office that's like has that community aspect to it. So like when we wrap, there's often people going back to the office and there's other people there working on other projects, and like, or we're going to a screening at the office, or we're watching footage there or things like that, that like, even though people go home to their own places, there's still like a central hub that like people are often congregating to just out of, you know, like it just feels right to sort of go there at the end of the day. Or sometimes that can be a local restaurant where we're shooting or things like that, that like we try to, you know, organically encourage these sort of social interactions that happen off the set, to be like, hey, we've wrapped, but like, hey, why don't we buy a round of drinks for everybody at the bar next door? And that way everybody can unwind and sort of talk about the day. And it's not this sort of like institutionalized on the clock, you know, thing. It's more of this social atmosphere. And we've always tried to like create that in some form because it just feels healthier and gets better creativity.
What's that whole thing of like making movies with your friends, which is what it sounds like you guys do. You know, you enjoy spending time with each other and you enjoy collaborating with each other, with the whole crew, it sounds like. So I think that's kind of a fun way to go about it.
Well, making movies is hard. Like it's like one of the hardest things to do. And if you're not doing it with your friends, like I don't know how you get it done.
It's all the money we get. That's why, Matt. These giant paychecks from these $100,000 indie films that we're doing.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky, like coming up, I worked in production before producing, and I was just very lucky to work on really special films. So like Into the Wild, which is behind me, was like, I was like a 20 something PA on that film for 8 months. Or like I worked on 3 Clint Eastwood films, or, you know, like I worked on Milk with Gus Van Sant. And like the things I saw from these successful sets were those ideas. It was like, what made the film successful was a crew that was inspired to be a part of it. Like they went to work every day feeling like, A, their contribution mattered, and that what they were contributing to mattered. And so like a lot of what we're always trying to do is figure out how to do that, like how to provide both those things, how to make crew members feel like they're a part of something um, that's worth doing, and that what they're doing is adding value to it. So like, you know, The Wolf of Snow Hollow, like it's a horror film, and it's very easy, like we talked about at the beginning of this before we officially started, that like there's a little bit of a stigma with horror sometimes of like, oh, it's schlocky, it doesn't matter, you know. But like what Jim was doing with that script to explore ideas, which is how I see all horror. Like I think, you know, all great horror has that sort of metaphor to it, where it's talking about bigger ideas and larger themes about humanity, but doing it in a digestible way, because it's through, you know, jump scares and monsters, but it's actually has like meaning to it. Like, you know, Jim did that successfully with the script of The Wolf of Snow Hollow. So everybody working on the film, like they felt like they were doing something that had meaning to it, and they had all seen Thunder Road and they had really connected with that. And so like it was easy to keep that drive to everybody, because those priorities stay important to us.
Can you actually all tell me a little bit about like your journey to producing? Like Matt, you said did you start out as a PA on Into the Wild? Was that your very first gig?
Oh no, I mean, I did the whole film school thing. And the short version was that I had actually gotten really close with a class at NYU when I was in high school, and they were all graduating when I went to college. And I sort of watched really talented people just sort of linger in the industry waiting for work to come to them. And so what I did when I got out of film school was like really set myself on a path of like, how do you make a movie? Like if I knew all the nuts and bolts and ins and outs of the actual production of a movie, in my mind, I could help keep the budgets low to a point where it was much easier to get a green light on something. And I could be in control of my own destiny, as opposed to be like waiting for gatekeepers to say like, okay, now it's okay to make your movie. And so I specifically went after working on films of directors that inspired me, or working out in films that like worked at a budget level that I knew I could successfully go and raise money for or apply for. So I went back and forth between like being the PA on these large films, or, you know, working as like a first or second AD on like very low budget films, to try to find that marriage of the two, of like, well, how do you spend less and still have a feature film, but how do you, you know, bring the sort of creative aesthetics of, you know, Christopher Nolan or Clint Eastwood to that. And that's what Vanishing Angel was sort of born out of, was that idea of like, how do you cut off all the fluff so you can keep the budgets at a way that you can take a lot of risks and support really interesting creativity, you know, and how do you create that environment that sets up the most amount of successful people. So I came into this because it's like all I've ever done, which is very different.
All right, how about you, Natalie? What's your journey to the producing like?
Yeah, I mean, I came at it in a totally kind of random, roundabout way. My background is in the dance world, like the dance and theater world. So that's what I had, you know, double majored in college. And I came out to LA actually to go to Cal Arts for grad school. I have a master's in choreography. And so I was doing, you know, these like kind of experimental physical theater pieces, and was just getting like really frustrated with the limitations of like live audiences. You know, you do kind of the same amount of work that you do for like a short film, let's say. There's like months of rehearsals and crewing up and like finding locations and like all this stuff. But at the end, you like put up this show and it only exists for a few weekends, and only people within like a 20-mile radius of the theater are going to drive out to see it. And I was just so frustrated with like the limitations of that audience. And so I started taking my dancers and just bringing them to like weird, cool locations and filming the choreography there. I just bought a DSLR camera and started shooting. And then, yeah, I like cut those together and sent them off to festivals, and they started actually like getting some attention and getting some awards. And I'm like, oh, cool, this is fun. Like, I'll continue doing this. And then my film school friends started asking me like, hey, can you help me make my film the way that you did yours? And I was like, sure. And so I started helping my friends. And then it kind of became a word of mouth thing where all of a sudden I was randomly getting emails from strangers saying, hey, so-and-so recommended you. I have this amount of money to pay you to produce my short. And I'm like, oh, I can get paid to do this? Awesome. So yeah, it just kind of like spun out from there. And so I started doing like music videos and commercials, which are actually very similar to dance films in many ways, and then jumped into series and features and documentaries. And once I kind of started, I never stopped. I fell in love with everything film.
That is random, but also it like makes sense as well, like somehow weirdly. Yeah, that's cool. And how about you, Ben?
I kind of fall between their experiences where like for years I was like in college, I would drive truck for like the wedding expo or whatever when it came into town. And my brother's in the dance world, so I would hang lights for dance. And that was always a part of what I was doing, like living in New York City with a bunch of filmmakers. 3 or 4 days a week, I was driving truck for whatever, but never thought of myself in that world because I went to school for poetry and I was running a lit press that we had started that's still doing dozens of books a year at this point. But I had reached some of the frustration Natalie was talking about where like 1,500 or 2,000 books sent across the world was pretty amazing. And that was kind of the limit of like what we could reach in a lot of ways. And looking at like the biggest poets are selling like 100,000 copies of something. And so we had this short film, Notes on Biology, and like nobody really had an idea what the film industry was or that it existed in our little group at that point. So we had a few friends over, we played it on our roof, and Danny put it on Vimeo in like March of 2011. And when we went to bed that night, we were like, what if over the next few years we could get like 10,000 people to see this? And that kind of, we pushed each other and we were like, we finally got to like, wait, what if 50,000 people see this eventually? How cool would that be? And sure enough, Sam Morrill, who was at Vimeo at that time, found it the next day, made it a Vimeo staff pick, sent it out to a bunch of other writers, and within like a week, it had 750,000 views. And they started getting us into our first film festivals and teaching us what film festivals were. And so it was the next March that that piece got into South by Southwest and won Best Animation there. And that was this kind of like, okay, well, now people are kind of paying attention to what we're doing and what do you have? And we had this like 53-minute short film with Danny's brother, who's in Wolf of Snow Hollow. Like it goes all the way back, but we had shot it 2.5 before, and we would just edit it when we had chances at night on AOL's computers. When we were driving truck for that. So it was kind of this like organic process of just, we were already in the middle of doing everything. And then it was later on where we were heading to South by Southwest for something. I think that was either with Euphonia or the next year with Confusion Through Sand. And I was like, hey, I can't keep just saying that I'm your roommate because I was having all the meetings for him. And that's kind of when like Jim and I and he talked about like, well, what you're doing is producing. But that's why we've always talked about producing being something that's very much a verb. And there are a lot of noun producers out there that can get money together, or they can get this, that, or the other thing. But then there's producing in that verb sense of like the person who's able to get just stuff going to get the thing made. And that's something that I've really appreciated about working with these two, is everybody is that type of person who like just wants to get the film into production, wants to get the film to audiences, wants to do that next step.
Yeah, you guys all definitely sound like very, very active in the role of your producing. And Ben, you went from roommate to producer. So I mean, that's a
Yeah. Had to live with him a few more times.
So what do? I'm a roommate, but I also make movies. Do you guys have any like specific like favorite moments of working on this film? Natalie, want to start with you?
Sure. I mean, there is a very kind of funny story that happened with the hot tub scene that's like in kind of like the first opening kind of moments where you know, this couple is supposed to be having this intimate moment in a hot tub, and Jim went out location scouting and found this like beautiful house that has this, you know, backdrop that's this like big mountaintop, and it was like perfect for where he wanted the first kill of the movie to be. But the unfortunate thing was that the house didn't have a hot tub, and there was this hot tub scene written into the script. And so we worked with the production designer Charlie Texter to get this like kind of like temporary hot tub installed, and it got there a couple days beforehand, but it never really got warm enough to put people in. So on the morning of, we like show up, and I think it was, what was it? And it was like in like the 50s or 60s. It was like
60 at that point. It had been on for 4 days.
Quite cold. It was still quite cold. And so, you know, and like one of those things, we're just like, okay, great, let's start filming other stuff. And we started putting pots and pans, all the pots and pans we could find in the house. We put it on the stove and just started boiling water, started hand carrying out boiling water out to this hot tub to try to raise the temperature. And it was all of us. It was like the three of us producers. We even had some like executives from the studio visiting that day, and they were helping us like, you know, bring pots and pans, and like all of art department. And I think we like eventually got it up into like upper 70s, which was like it's still very chilly to be in, especially in like a bikini, but it was at least like not gonna cause hypothermia. And so but that was just like, you know, a funny moment of everyone kind of jumping in to help fix this creatively problem solved.
I love the image of the producers and studio execs doing the boiling water and into like cowboy bathing it, like in just like a train as you just keep it going.
Exactly what it was.
But also to raise it like a whole 10 degrees, like you guys put in some work. I'm impressed by that. How about you, Matt? Do you have any like favorite moments or favorite anecdotes from the shoot?
I mean, I loved like the entire shoot. I was like smiling more than I had in many, many years running around. Like I love the cold weather. Like I'm that guy who never wears gloves. And, you know, it had just been so long since I'd been able to be with my friends on location, because I'm the owner of the company and I often get stuck back at the office while they're out having fun. So it was like really nice to be able to be out there with everybody. The hardest day for me, which was probably the same as the hardest day for Ben, is that at that same location with the hot tub, we went to that location twice. And the first time we went, it was a blizzard. And it was at the top of a hill, and a hill that they had never plowed because it had snowed and cars had driven through the snow and created these like divots that had frozen over. So the plow actually couldn't go over them.
It wasn't a paved road. It was like a dirt.
Oh, okay.
So there were like these sort of like divots that like a plow just couldn't do anything with. So when it snowed and we got like 6 feet of snow that day or something, like
no, not 6 feet. We got 12 inches though before we started shooting in like that hour and a half period.
Yeah, I remember the day. I think it was like, and what was tough for Ben and I, so Ben was in charge of picture cars, and he had gotten our police cars for the film from a local place in Utah for a run of show that we just used as our actual like transportation vehicles, because none of us were local and all flown in. Like we actually were just like, well, we'll use these picture cars and we'll drive around in them. So like as the producers, we just drove around in cop cars.
We learned that on Thunder Road, yeah.
But we got to the point where we were like, you know, we've got to get the cop car to the top of the hill. And like Benny and I trying to get that car up the hill, like we eventually, like one of our passenger vans got stuck in the snow, so we had to push that out. And then we're just trying to drive it up, and we're like halfway up, and finally this local drives up in a truck, and he's like, "You want help?" And we're like, "Yes." And he just chains us up, and it was like a wild ride up this hill. It's like being pulled by chains from this truck all the way to the top, and then he got it to a point, and then we just had to like push it into place, and then suddenly it was like, all right, the car needs to be facing the other way now for the shot, and we had to like just manhandle it around. I think Natalie cracked a rib. Like,
at some point, I think Matt was inside, Ben was pushing on one side, and I was on another, and like I was pushing against a snowbank. So I at one point I got completely horizontal so that my like legs are pushing against, and like,
oh my God.
against the cop car. And like the first idea is like, what's happening with my producers? And it was very
well, you can see in the
fun.
movie, there's a shot, it's the first crime scene that they're at. And there was a point where Jim's like, well, I want the car to pull away. And we're like, the car doesn't pull away, Jim. He's like, well, it has to. We see it leave the scene. And we're like, well, we're going to figure out something in post because it does not pull away. And there's a shot where you see the car pull away and they watch the roof of the car pull away. Their eyes just follow it. And what we did on set, we were like, just look at a car as if it's pulling away. And that's what they did. And then later we added the roof of a car in post-production driving away from them. And the sound of it, because like there was just no way to move the car.
Oh my God, I need to go back and rewatch that scene now, knowing that. Because it didn't look weird to me like when I watched it, and I watched it on a giant ass drive-in screen. So well done.
And the production value of the snow was like incredible. I mean, it
Yeah,
was supposed to be snowing
was
over the scene. We just lucked out. It was like a snow globe. It was beautiful. But definitely a hard day for Ben and I.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Pushed a few things up that hill, yeah.
Ben, do you have another favorite memory, or is that yours also?
That wasn't my favorite.
I'm using favorite very loosely. I get memorable moment.
I won't tell the memorable in a bad way part of this story. There was a lot that happened that night too. But the first time we did a werewolf attack is when they're in that old little Jeep. And that was such a fun night. It just like, it was the third or fourth day, Natalie, fourth day, probably.
Yeah, and it was Chloe's first night shooting, and like the first scene that we throw her into is this like overnight scene where she's in her underwear in a truck without heating, like outdoors, and it's a stunt, and she did all of her own stunts because she's a dancer. So we're just like throwing her into the fire.
14 degrees and you're in your underwear. But that was such a neat experience, and like getting this, like as Matt was saying, I have a fascination with doing the picture vehicle stuff. So I had gotten this like $600 giant old like 1984 Jeep that had this great suspension, so you could just yank on it, and it really did look and feel like this crazy attack. But just getting out there and like seeing the werewolf for the first time, seeing all the crew really engaged in this like full scale of production, because the first few days we had kind of been in these smaller locations and everything like that, but you could feel everybody coming to life and everybody just so excited about like, oh, we're making a goddamn werewolf out here.
Yeah, we had actually taken over an entire town for that night. We were shooting this town called Echo, and like Echo has like maybe a total of like 10 to 12 houses. It's just this like one street with like 2 rows of houses. And so we kind of took over the entire town, and we're shooting down this like one street. And so we kind of had like the whole like lay of the land, and it was like really fun to like walk a little bit outside of set and just get this like sense of like seeing it all happen. And we had like cranes and like all sorts of stuff all around that night to create the lighting, and that was really cool.
Can I tell a bad story from that night?
No. But
no need.
I do think it's important. One of the funny things that happened during prep was our production designer, Charlie Texter, had to, come up with all the body parts and limbs and, dead corpses, and stuff. And so we got this cadaver that was like kind of like staying with us in this bed and breakfast that we were all
under Charlie in my bunk bed.
Yeah. And like it looked pretty gnarly, and and of course, like in preparation for different shoot days, he had to make it all bloody, and the bed and breakfast is kind of on this like like bigger, like kind of main road in the city of Camas. And so I remember there was one day where he brought the cadaver out and just like kind of laid it out like right next to the road and was like pouring blood onto it. And so it just like looks like there's this like dead girl covered in blood on the side of the road. And like I remember thinking like people are going to stop, and like I mean you could tell traffic was kind of slowing down and what's happening over there. So yeah, and that cadaver just like lived with us. I think my room ended up getting converted into Chloe's bedroom.
Yeah.
And I think the night that it was converted, you guys put the cadaver in my room when I got back. If I
Might have happened.
I think I like jumped like about 10 feet when I opened the door.
That sounds a little familiar, yeah.
And like even just like doing the werewolf tests and stuff, like I'm gonna go as spoiler free as possible, but there is a werewolf in the movie, and we did do it practically. And so like we would practically test that at the Airbnb we were staying at. And the Airbnb compound was an old farm. So I remember like the actor who put on the outfit was like outside in the farm and started getting interactions from like the local farm animals. Like there was like this turkey that would like try to pick fight with people that like got all crazy about it. And I think at one point, Ben, was it like a dog or a cat that like
the cat that came up and he held it while he was in the outfit. So you see this werewolf like gently holding this like little cat. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
I hope you guys have a lot of really good behind the scenes stills and video of this, because there's some weird, awesome stuff that happened behind the scenes.
For sure.
Yeah, there's unfortunately a video of me like taking a saw to the leg of a taxidermy deer at one point that I wish hadn't ever happened.
Make it
I
go
have
viral.
sledgehammer evidence too.
Yeah, sledgehammers and saws, yeah.
All right, guys, I have one more wrap-up question for you from a viewer. This is from Pierce. Other than Josh Rubin's new werewolf film, do you have any other genre films in development?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Natalie, I feel like you should go as our VP of development.
Sure. I mean, well, so Jim's newest movie is actually, it's this erotic thriller called The Beta Test that we're in post-production on. And so we're finishing that up, and it'll most likely be coming out sometime next year. And then, yeah, we have a new horror film that we're shooting. I don't think we're allowed to say who we're shooting it with right now. Not yet.
Not quite.
We have like a new one that we're shooting in February that we're really excited about, with a really cool director, but it hasn't been announced yet, so we can't really talk about it, but it is coming down the pike next year. And then what else? We do have a sci-fi series that we're going to be making next year that we're super excited about. And we do have a couple other horror projects that are in the works, but don't have set dates yet. But yeah, we're definitely going to be making some more genre material in the coming years.
But the movie we did with Josh Rubin is called Werewolves Within, and that, we're hoping there'll be some news about that, sometime in the new year, because we're really proud of it. It's very different. It's like a horror comedy. It's sort of like where we describe Wolf of Snow Hollow as if like a David Fincher cop procedural where the killer
Zodiac as a comedy, right? Is what Jim calls
it. Zodiac meets Thunder Road, yeah. Or King of the Hill.
Like the serial killer may or may not be a werewolf. Like what we say about the wolf with Werewolves Within is that like it's kind of like Knives Out, where the killer may or may not be a werewolf. So
I can neither confirm nor deny this. That's
you never want to confirm if there's really a werewolf.
No.
Yeah, it's a very fun, like kind of ensemble comedy that like has these, it's kind of like that. It's based off of this Ubisoft game that's based off of the old school kind of like a parlor game called Mafia, if like you ever played that.
Oh,
where,
yeah.
You're like trying to like ferret out who is like the person that is doing like bad things within the group. And so it's this kind of like ensemble group of like amazing comedians that are all trying to like figure out who might be killing people and who might be a werewolf. So yeah.
Okay,
And
now the knives out element makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Fun.
And I won't confirm if there is or if not a werewolf, but I will say that like any effects that we do, we did practically.
Okay. If there were a werewolf involved, it would be all practically done.
And if people died and got bloody, or what, you know, if that does happen in the film, which I can't say if it does.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much. This was awesome. I had a blast talking with you all, and I'm looking forward to all of your upcoming projects.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having
Okay.
us. It was a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice to meet you all. Okay,
Yeah.
bye.